If I was even approved for coverage, cost me thousands per month in premiums. I was being penalized, Mr. Speaker, for being sick. There were many times when I could not get coverage that I had to choose between which prescriptions I would get to have or whether I would get all my meds or the groceries we needed. You know, there are far too many people in the United States of America right now, before experiencing the devastating consequences of this one big, ugly bill, who have to choose between putting food on the table, clothing on their backs, access to medication, or paying the rent. The United States of America is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Not a single hard-working American taxpayer should ever have to choose between food or medicine or rent or putting clothing on their back. Not a single hard-working American taxpayer should ever have to make that choice. If people did not have to worry about health care being accessible, they would be able to be seen when necessary. And when people are able to see doctors when they are unwell, they can stay healthy for longer periods of time. When people can stay healthy, they don't miss work. When people don't miss work, they don't risk losing their jobs. The way things work now only encourages the constant classist act of keeping the sick and poor sick and poor. This should never, ever be a situation in a country that claims to have the best functioning economy in the world, the best doctors, the best universities. Ashley lives in Colorado's 3rd congressional district.
The gentleman is not recognized. The House will be in order.
Ashley
New York's recognized.
Lives in Colorado's 3rd congressional district, represented by my colleague, Congressman Jeff Hurd. Ann also writes from Colorado. Through the Medicaid waiver, Scott, Ann's son, was placed in a group living situation that worked out for a while, but was eventually kicked out. After that, he moved back in with me, but ended up homeless once more, before finally being placed back.
Last year, I got 2 lakh of passive income from Wind12 bonds. Let's say if I'm looking to invest my money in an instrument that is safer than the equity, then I'm probably looking for something that saves my principal, right? I like about Wind is that it's SEBI regulated. And second thing is the bonds that you're offering are asset-backed bonds. So I can invest in bonds and forget about it, considering that it's a much safer investment and it keeps giving me that passive income.
Download Wind12 app now.
Investments in debt securities, municipal debt securities, securitized debt instruments are subject to risks, including delay and or default in payment. Read all the offer-related documents carefully.
क्या बात है, बड़ी खुश लग रही हो।
अरे खुश क्यों नहीं होंगी, अब भी जब स्टॉक मार्केट पे अच्छे रिटर्न्स लगे हैं।
क्या बात कर रही हो, इतने डाउन ट्रेंड मार्केट में स्टॉक मार्केटिंग से रिटर्न।
आओ दिखाती हूँ। एक ऐप है यूनिवर्स, जहाँ मुझे सेबी रजिस्टर्ड रिसर्च एनालिस्ट की इक्विटी फ्यूचर ऑप्शन की ट्रेड रिकमेंडेशन मिल जाती है, वो भी विद प्रॉपर एंट्री एंड एग्जिट अलर्ट्स।
एक्चुअली मैं भी यूनिवर्स से ही हूँ और मैं आपको इसके बेनिफिट्स बताने आया था, पर आप तो ऑलरेडी यूनिवर्स के बेनिफिट्स उठा रही हो।
और आपको पता है आपका यूनिवर्स सब्सक्रिप्शन सिर्फ ₹199 का पड़ा है। इससे ज्यादा महंगी तो मेरी एक लिपस्टिक आ जाती है।
एग्जैक्टली। सो व्हाट आर यू गाइस वेटिंग फॉर?
यस, सो डाउनलोड द यूनिवर्स ऐप नाउ।
Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing. For further disclosure, visit our website.
Attack on health care, Mr. Speaker, in the United States of America moves us in the opposite direction. Daniela is also from Colorado. She writes to us, Medicaid has been a lifeline for our family, especially for my 5-year-old daughter who has autism. That's the thing, Mr. Speaker. Medicaid is important for so many Americans all across this country, including people with disabilities. It's a necessary lifeline so that parents can help their children live a better life with dignity and respect. Why would any legislation that this House passes attack health care available to families that are pouring in everything they have to help their child under difficult circumstances live the best possible life? It perplexes me, Mr. Speaker, that this bill would go after the health care of people like Daniela and her 5-year-old daughter. Daniela says that as parents, we've faced many struggles trying to balance full-time work, starting a real estate business, and still being there for our 3 other children. It's been overwhelming at times, and finding the right support for her hasn't always been easy. But Medicaid has provided therapy and services that have made a world of difference in her life. These therapies have helped her make progress, feel seen, and connect with her peers, which means everything to us. It's allowed her to be a part of the world, to feel included, and to overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable at times. Medicaid has helped us give her the opportunities she deserves, and millions of other children in the United States. Mr. Speaker, Daniela lives in Colorado's 8th Congressional District, a district currently represented by Congressman Gabe Evans. Currently represented. Mr. Speaker, we heard from Martha, who writes from Florida. I have an adult daughter with developmental and intellectual disabilities who needs Medicaid for her medical care. As a mom, I worry a lot about what the future will hold for her. Will she have access to quality medical care? When Kim writes to us, SNAP and Medicaid were lifelines when my children were younger. at least when I was able to get them. As a single mom, working my way up from low-paying jobs, we often had too little food. My dinner was the combined uneaten food from my 4 kids' plates. Even then, keeping benefits was difficult due to missing or late paperwork, faxes lost to the ether. I sometimes worked 3 jobs and cried too often when the letter came saying benefits were suspended. When that happens, you end up hungry for weeks until it's straightened out. Kim lives in the 9th Congressional District of Indiana, Mr. Speaker. She says, SNAP and Medicaid were lifelines when my children were younger, at least when I was able to get them. Let me park right there for a moment, because one of the arguments that I've consistently heard made, Mr. Speaker, by my Republican colleagues on the other side of the aisle is that they weren't going after Medicaid recipients, that no benefits would be taken away as a result of these so-called work requirements. Let's fact check that statement. Every independent entity that has looked at this question, including the Congressional Budget Office, has made clear, as a result of the one big, ugly bill, millions of Americans will lose their Medicaid benefits. These so-called work requirements are just a smokescreen, because more than 90% of the people who receive Medicaid benefits who can work, do work right now in the United States of America. Right now, more than 90%. What these impositions are really paperwork requirements that are designed to make it harder for everyday Americans like Kim to access their benefits. And as a result, millions of Americans who are eligible, who are hardworking, who are deserving, will lose their health care. Kim says, I sometimes worked 3 jobs and cried too often when the letter came saying benefits were suspended. As House Democrats, Mr. Speaker, we are here fighting for people like Kim and millions of others like her all across the United States of America who will lose urgently necessary, life-changing, and life-sustaining Medicaid benefits as a result of Donald Trump's one big, ugly bill. We hear from Maria, from Iowa, in the great heartland of this country. Maria writes to us, in 2021, I got seriously sick with COVID. I ended up in a coma for 12 days, spent 3.5 weeks in the ICU, and then another 3 weeks on the recovery floor. If it wasn't for Medicaid, I wouldn't have received any of the care I needed. I honestly don't know where I'd be today. I don't know what my family would have done. Without Medicaid, I wouldn't have made it. If I lost Medicaid, it would completely change my life. I wouldn't be able to afford my insulin, diabetes medications, blood pressure medications, or see my endocrinologist, all of which are life-sustaining treatments. I also need to see my pulmonary specialist regularly. Without Medicaid, my health would deteriorate rapidly. That's a statement that applies to millions of Americans all across this great country. Who are at risk of losing their health care because this one big, ugly Republican bill has put a target on their back. Mr. Speaker, without Medicaid, my health would deteriorate. Taking the time to share these stories because this is a question for so many Americans of life and death. It's extraordinary that on the House floor, in the middle of the night, the American people are forced to confront a bill that targets their health care and will result in their well-being deteriorating. More than 17 million Americans at risk of losing health care coverage, and then tens of millions more experiencing increased premiums, co-pays, and deductibles as a result of the attack on health care in this bill. Many of them will also lose coverage, lose their health care. These are Americans on private insurance, employer-provided insurance, but because of the health care attacks in this bill, their premiums, their co-pays, their deductibles will go up. Some will not be able to afford it, and they will lose their health care. That's what this bill represents. It's why I'm taking the time to share these stories and experiences and concerns and fears and anxieties of the American people. I wish, Mr. Speaker, that we had a lot more time to debate this bill. This is the type of bill that under normal circumstances, we'd have hours and hours of debate, where hundreds of members could participate on both sides of the aisle and share their thoughts, their perspectives, their ideas, their passionate support or passionate opposition. But this bill, which by some estimates is larger than the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the CHIPS and Science Act combined in terms of its possible impact on the debt in this country, increasing the debt by more than $3 trillion, saddling our children and grandchildren with that level of extraordinary debt by people who claim to be fiscally responsible. The implications of this bill are enormous. And yet, each side of the Ways and Means Committee was given 15 minutes to discuss the implications of this bill. Each side of the Budget Committee was given 15 minutes to discuss the implications of this bill that will have devastating consequences for everyday Americans, while rewarding billionaires with massive tax breaks. It had been my hope, Mr. Speaker, that we'd be able to have a robust debate, passionate support or passionate opposition in connection with this bill, that hundreds of members on both sides of the aisle could participate in. Instead, we have a limited debate where the relevant committees of jurisdiction have been given 15 minutes each on a bill of such significant magnitude as it relates to the health, the safety, and the well-being of the American people. And because that debate was so limited, I feel the obligation, Mr. Speaker, to stand on this House floor and take my sweet time to tell the stories of the American people. And that's exactly what I intend to do. Take my sweet time on behalf of the American people, on behalf of their health care, on behalf of their Medicaid, on behalf of their nutritional assistance, on behalf of veterans, on behalf of farmers, on behalf of children, on behalf of seniors, on behalf of people with disabilities, on behalf of small businesses, on behalf of every single American. I'm on this House floor after 6 a.m. and I'm planning to take my sweet time. Without Medicaid, I wouldn't have made it. If I lost Medicaid, it would completely change my life. It would also severely affect my husband with epilepsy. Without Medicaid, he wouldn't be able to afford his seizure medications, which means he'd have seizures every week, like he did before. This would leave him unable to function or work. Before he had Medicaid, he'd have a seizure. and it would take him days to recover. His health is inconsistent, which makes it hard for him to hold down a job. I still have my house, my car, my husband, and my health. Thank God for that. But why should we have to struggle so hard just to live? In a country with so much wealth, I'm considered one of the lucky ones. And yet I still struggle to make ends meet for the basics. That's Maria, pouring her heart out to us as members of Congress about her struggles. She lives in Iowa's 1st Congressional District, represented by our colleague, Mr. Speaker, Representative Marionette Miller Meeks. In a country with so much wealth, I'm considered one of the lucky ones, and yet I still struggle to make ends meet for the basics. Maria makes this important point as we stand on the threshold of the 4th of July. Thomas Jefferson, having written those immortal words in the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain...
Gentlemen will suspend. Members are reminded to take their conversations off the floor. Close both sets of cloakroom doors, please. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I'm not going to get any love for the other side of the aisle, I would expect that at least Thomas Jefferson would. He wrote in the Declaration of Independence that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What is the pursuit of happiness in the United States of America here in the year of our Lord, 2025? Imagine a country where every single American can afford to live the good life. Work hard, play by the rules, live the good life. That's the American dream. But our concern as Democrats is that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, there are far too many people like Maria from Iowa who are unable to achieve that American dream, unable, despite working hard and playing by the rules, to live the good life, good paying job, good housing, good health care, good education for your children, and a good retirement. That should not be too much to ask for here in the United States of America. But instead of working to bring that American dream to life for the greatest number of people all across the country, this one big ugly bill, Mr. Speaker, that our Republican colleagues are trying to jam down the throats of the American people will undermine their quality of life. Also hear from Patrick. Lives in the heartland of this country. One of the good people of Iowa, who says, I'm a registered nurse in the ICU at the VA hospital in Iowa City. I've worked as a nurse for 30 years, and I'm a native Iowan. I have 2 disabled children who are on Medicaid. My son had a severe brain injury as a child and requires extensive physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. My daughter is autistic and lives independently on housing provided by Medicaid. Before we had Medicaid, we were bankrupt paying for their treatment. We would go bankrupt again if Medicaid is cut. These are complicated systems for people with very complicated needs. These quote-unquote common sense solutions they're coming up with are not based in reality. People have tried these work requirements in the past, but even disabled or able-bodied people, we all have barriers. From childcare, transportation, monetary limitations. It's a foolish idea to think that this won't have a negative impact. They're just trying to remove people from the program, and it's cruel. Patrick, you are correct. Thank you for your service as a registered nurse.
The Sleep Company brings you pure, innovative science in every mattress. This is India's only patented smart grid technology. It adapts and quietly readjusts to the shape of your body, providing softness to relax your pressure points and firmness to support your back. It has more than 2,500 plus air channels that keep you cool all night, so you can sleep peacefully. The Sleep Company. Visit our nearest store now.
Priya added a hotel to her flight just because it had a floating breakfast. Expedia, made to travel.
Mr. Speaker, cruelty should never be the objective or the outcome of legislation that we consider here in the House of Representatives. But it is cruel to take away Medicaid from the American people. And that is why, as House Democrats, we will continue to show up and speak up and stand up in defense of the health care of the American people. I'm thankful for all of my colleagues who are here, who throughout this process, a difficult process, have stood up over and over and over again on behalf of the health care of the American people. Thankful for my colleagues in leadership, Whip Catherine Clark and Chair Pete Aguilar, and all of the members of House Democratic leadership. Thankful for the leaders of every single committee who's been battling hard to push back against the cruelty that is in this one big, ugly bill. Thankful for the leadership of Richie Neal. Thankful for the leadership of Frank Pallone. Thankful for the leadership of Brendan Boyle. Thankful for the leadership of Angie Craig. I'm thankful for the leadership, the principal leadership of every single member of the House Democratic Caucus. But above all else, I'm just thankful for the spirit, the heart, and soul of the American people who have risen up throughout this country to make it clear to all of us in this institution, keep your hands off our Medicaid. Keep your hands off our health care, our Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act. Keep your hands off our Medicaid. That's why, Mr. Speaker, I stand before you today to lift up stories on behalf of the American people. Don't have the great privilege and honor to stand on this House floor, as all of us, Democrats and Republicans alike do, on behalf of the American people in this great institution, the House of Representatives. But to me, what we are doing with this one big ugly bill, this assault on health care, on veterans, on nutritional assistance, this assault on good paying, clean energy jobs, this assault on the high cost of living in the United States of America, all of it is inconsistent with the best of what this House of Representatives should be doing for such a time as this. And so I stand here on behalf of everyday Americans like Elizabeth, who's also from Iowa. Elizabeth suffered from sepsis caused by untreated strep throat. After waiting to receive care while uninsured and without paid sick leave. After receiving care she needed, she was able to apply for Medicaid and have her medical bills retroactively covered. Now, Medicaid has allowed her to get access to essential and preventative health care. Mr. Speaker, Elizabeth lives in the congressional district represented by our colleague, Zach Nunn, Iowa's 3rd congressional district. Thank you, Elizabeth, for highlighting one of the concerns that all of us should have with this bill. When you launch an all-out assault on the health care of the American people, when you effectively end Medicaid as we know it, gut parts of the Affordable Care Act, what you essentially are doing by stripping health care away from the American people, putting people like Elizabeth back in the position that she had previously been in, where she has untreated medical conditions that won't get better on its own. It will likely get worse and lead to further medical complications. Why would we do that to the American people? That is wrong. We should be lifting people up in this country, not tearing them down. We should be lifting up everyday Americans, not tearing them down, and putting them at risk of their life, their quality of life, their health, their well-being, getting worse. We hear from Becky from the great state of Louisiana. By the way, Louisiana is a state with some of the highest percentages of Medicaid recipients of any state in the Union. Any state in the Union. And Louisiana is a state at risk of suffering greatly as a result of the all-out assault on Medicaid that is part of Donald Trump's one big ugly bill. Becky tells us, I have had Medicaid for years, and without it, I wouldn't be able to afford to see my doctors or cover what Medicaid doesn't pay. As a senior citizen, I now have to go back to work just to keep a roof over my head, afford rising food and utility costs, and maintain my car. Meanwhile, the government keeps taking more and more out of my Social Security benefits. Money I already paid taxes on while working. Feels like the middle class no longer exists. You're either rich or poor. Politicians today have no real understanding of what it's like to struggle every single day. If they had to live like regular people, maybe things would improve for seniors like me. Becky lives in Louisiana's 3rd Congressional District, a district represented by our colleague, Mr. Speaker, Representative Clay Higgins. Louisiana, state, of course, also represented by my good friend and colleague, Congressman Troy Carter, who I see is here with us in the chamber also, Cleo Fields, another good friend and colleague. Louisiana, a state that stands to suffer mightily as a result of this all-out assault on Medicaid. Now, I heard my distinguished colleague, Mr. Speaker, the House Majority Leader, someone who personally respect his resilience, his perseverance, his journey. I think he comes by his views in good faith. It's his perspective, it's the speaker's perspective. But many of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have made the representation that as House Democrats, we're not telling the truth to the American people about the devastating impact that Donald Trump's one big ugly bill, a bill being rushed through this chamber, will have on the health and the well-being of people in Louisiana and all across the country. They've accused us of fear-mongering and making misrepresentations. And so I was surprised to learn, Mr. Speaker, that the Louisiana State Legislature recently voted. The Louisiana State Legislature that has a Republican supermajority. The Louisiana State Legislature recently voted to condemn the one big ugly bill because of the extraordinary attack on Medicaid that will adversely impact their constituents. We're telling the truth. This one big ugly bill will hurt everyday Americans in Louisiana and all across the country. Don't take our word for it. Take the word of the Louisiana State Legislature. Supermajority.
Who done?
So we're here on the House floor, taking our sweet time to tell the stories of the American people and the adverse impact that Trump's one big ugly bill, that my House Republican colleagues, Mr. Speaker, are trying to jam down the throats of the American people, causing great harm to those who we should be working hard to protect, love, and cherish, not adversely impact their ability to live and live life more abundantly. Tamara, who lives in Louisiana's 4th Congressional District, represented by the Speaker of this great House. I have depression and PTSD. I'm unable to work and rely on Medicaid to get my monthly medications to keep me essentially alive. Tamara, we're going to continue to fight hard on your behalf. We heard from Emily, who lives in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Emily tells us that I'd moved to Massachusetts in 2020. and was working a retail job for minimum wage. I was unable to afford much, but the state thankfully approved me for SNAP assistance and Medicaid. Without that jump start, I'm not sure where I would be today. There shouldn't be shame or stigma surrounding these programs. You never know when life will get pulled out from underneath you. The relief when these programs can come to your aid is indescribable. Emily lives in the 5th Congressional District of Massachusetts, a district that is represented by the House Democratic Whip, Catherine Clark, who's a strong champion on your behalf, Emily, powerfully, ethically, principally, fighting hard on your behalf. Casey lives in the 2nd Congressional District of Maine, a district represented by Congressman Jared Golden. Thankful for Congressman Golden's service. He served this nation with distinction overseas and has come back home to serve this nation in the United States Congress. Casey writes, as a single mom of 2 young children and non-profit professional in rural Maine, Casey and her children rely on Medicaid and SNAP to live their lives. The resources and stability provided by Medicaid and SNAP allowed Casey to leave her emotionally abusive husband and support her children. Casey's 7-year-old son has ADHD and is on the autism spectrum. Relies heavily on individualized support through Medicaid. If Medicaid goes away, Casey doesn't know how their family will stay afloat. The American people pouring into us, Democrats and Republicans, in the United States House of Representatives, the People's House, pouring into us with all of their heart, all of their soul, all of their authenticity, pleading that this Congress would find it in our hearts to stand up for them and not stand up for billionaires, which is what this one big ugly bill is designed to accomplish. Sarah writes to us from Michigan's 4th Congressional District. My daughter has a heart condition, and the fact that she's on Medicaid is the only way that we can pay for her doctor visits and medications. I'm a widow, and money is very tight. So the fact that I'm on Medicaid, too, is the only way that I can pay for my own visits and meds. The loss of Medicaid for us would be absolutely devastating. Mr. Speaker, Sarah lives in Michigan's 4th congressional district, a district currently represented by our colleague, Congressman Bill Huizenga. The loss of Medicaid for us would be absolutely devastating. That's the consequence of the GOP tax scam, this disgusting abomination, this reckless Republican budget. Mr. Speaker, that Republicans were trying to jam down the throats of the American people during the dead of night. It's extraordinary. No legislation that we consider in the House of Representatives should be devastating for everyday Americans, either in its objective or in its outcome. But as Democrats, we stand here in strong opposition to this one big ugly bill because of the devastating consequences that will result to everyday Americans all across this great country. Lucy writes to us from the heartland, from the great state of Michigan as well. My brother is a developmentally disabled senior who lives in a group home. Until the
बॉक्स ऑफिस हिट होने के बावजूद इस मल्टीप्लेक्स को काफी नुकसान हुआ जब आशा ने सुपरस्टार स्वैग अपनाया और पूरी पब्लिक को हिला दिया।
मिम साहब, यहाँ फिल्म देखते हो या फिल्म स्टार बनने के सपने?
जब मिंत्रा पे हजारों सेलेब लुक्स हैं, तो कोई फिल्म स्टार जैसा क्यों ना दिखे?
मिंत्रा से कपड़े? बड़े घरवाली होगी।
अरे नहीं, सिर्फ 999 में।
हजारों सेलेब लुक्स, वो भी 999 में। इसलिए संभल के रहना दोस्तों। मिंत्रा के साथ फैशन विद कॉशन।
mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, husbands and wives, pleading with this Congress, pleading with House Republicans to stand up for their loved ones who are on Medicaid, who are at risk of having their health care run over and their lives ruined by the consequences of Donald Trump's one big, ugly bill. Lucy lives in Michigan's 7th congressional district, a district currently represented, Mr. Speaker, by our colleague, Representative Tom Barrett. We've also heard from Sharon, who lives in Michigan. My daughter is a young woman who was born with cerebral palsy, mild cognitive impairments, and autism. She depends on Medicaid services for her health. Safety and well-being. She's unable to work or take care of herself. She's unable to work or care for herself without help. Without Medicaid, she is totally at risk. Cutting Medicaid To give tax cuts to wealthy billionaires is not only cruel and unethical, Sharon writes, but it puts vulnerable people, including children, at risk of severe mental and physical health problems. Do the right thing and rescind the drastic cuts to Medicaid for vulnerable people with serious physical disabilities and people with serious and persistent mental health problems. Mr. Speaker, Sharon lives in the 10th Congressional District, represented by our colleague, Congressman John James. I don't know how the congressman from the great state of Michigan will vote at the end of the day as it relates to defending people like Sharon. But as Sharon writes, I know what I can say. She says, do the right thing and rescind the drastic cuts to Medicaid for vulnerable people with serious physical disabilities and people with serious and persistent mental health problems. Sharon, House Democrats will always do the right thing when it comes to your health, your safety, and your well-being, your Medicaid, and the love and care that you are working hard to provide to your daughter. We will always do the right thing. We're not perfect, no one is. But we will always strive to do the right thing on your behalf. As I work through these stories in the Midwest, and it appears, Mr. Speaker, that I'm about halfway through the stories as it relates to Medicaid. 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 It appears that I'm halfway through the stories as it relates to Medicaid, but the extraordinary thing about this bill is that it represents such an unprecedented assault on the American people that there are stories that need to be told as it relates to the attack on nutritional assistance for the American people. And I will tell those stories. Stories that need to be told as it relates to the attack that has taken place on farmers in this country. And I will tell those stories. Stories that need to be told as it relates to the attack on small businesses. Stories that need to be told as it relates to the unprecedented assault on veterans in this country. How dare this administration attack veterans who have served this country? Instead of attacking veterans, we should make sure that every single veteran in this country can live with the dignity and respect that they've earned. So there are stories that need to be told as it relates to the veterans in this country. And there are stories that need to be told as it relates to law-abiding immigrant families. We have to secure our border. We believe that we have a broken immigration system. It should be fixed in a comprehensive and bipartisan way. But we must also stand up for dreamers and farm workers and law-abiding immigrant families in this country. We will not abandon our nation's heritage as a country of immigrants. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. It's part of what American exceptionalism has been all about. So stories that need to be told. William writes to us from the great state of Minnesota. So thankful for our colleagues from the Minnesota delegation fighting hard on behalf of that great state. I'm a 57-year-old man living in central Minnesota. I am a type 1 insulin-dependent diabetic, legally blind, and I suffer from severe nerve damage in my back and legs due to diabetes. I rely on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and SNAP benefits to support myself. Any reduction in these programs would severely impact my life and my ability to afford food, pay for my small apartment, and access medical care. Without these benefits, I would be destitute. William lives in Minnesota's 6th congressional district. Mr. Speaker, a district represented by our colleague, Congressman Tom Emmer. Say to William, I don't know what the majority whip will ultimately decide to do as it relates to this one big ugly bill. But we're going to stand up for the things that clearly matter to you. We're going to stand up for Social Security, stand up for your Medicare, stand up for Medicaid, stand up for your SNAP benefits, and stand up for you. I'd also note, parenthetically, it's not rhetorical that we are claiming to stand up for people like William, a 57-year-old man living in central Minnesota. He notes two things that are of interest to me. He says that I'm a type 1 insulin-dependent diabetic. And then also says, I rely on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and SNAP benefits to support myself. Which suggests to me that William actually may have been a beneficiary of some of the hard work that has taken place on this side of the aisle. His life is not perfect. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done. But as a type 1 insulin-dependent diabetic who's also on Medicare, as a result of the Inflation Reduction Act, his insulin at this point, always and forever, will be no more than $35 per month. That's a down payment, William, on the type of work that we believe needs to be done. Because we are committed to lowering your costs. Despite all the talk that comes from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, Mr. Speaker, on day one, promising to lower the high cost of living. Costs would go down on day one. Costs haven't gone down. Mr. Speaker, in the United States of America, costs are going up. Life remains far too expensive. And as a result of some of the reckless policies coming out of the Trump administration, including the Trump tariffs, on again, off again, creating so much uncertainty, but certainly will result in thousands of dollars per year in additional costs on everyday Americans. We're committed to lowering the high cost of living. We're committed to making sure that every single person in this country can afford to live the good life. Good paying job, good housing, good health care, good education for their children, and a good retirement. We're committed to working hard to make sure that every single American like William can afford to live the good life. This one big ugly bill does the exact opposite. Does it make life more affordable, Mr. Speaker? It makes life more expensive.
The gentleman suspend. House will be in order. As the caffeine kicks in, please take your conversations outside the chamber or in the cloakroom. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Without Medicaid, Heather from the great state of Minnesota writes, without Medicaid, my 3 kids and I would have no insurance. I couldn't afford my epilepsy and schizophrenia medications. My kids wouldn't have access to health care, including ER visits, physicals, vaccinations, and dental cleanings. Heather lives in Minnesota's 8th Congressional District, represented by our colleague, Mr. Speaker, Congressman Peter Stauber. Lynn writes to us, from Missouri, the Show Me State, a state ably represented by Representative Emanuel Cleaver and Representative Wesley Bell. Lynn writes to us, says that I'm a widow near 70 with very little family left and have been diagnosed with breast cancer. I have an adult son, severely disabled. He already has lost transportation services due to low Medicaid funding. And if Medicaid is cut, it will be disastrous for my situation. Lynn knows that this one big ugly bill puts a target on the back of Medicaid. One of the senators from the great state of Missouri, Senator Josh Hawley, spent months warning about the damage that Donald Trump's one big ugly bill would do to the people of Missouri as a result of the all-out assault on Medicaid. And then turned around and voted to cut Medicaid from his constituents. So shocking, it's so disappointing. So heartbreaking for many Americans that a lot of people in the House of Representatives, Mr. Speaker, a lot of people in the Senate have talked a good game about Medicaid, but then turned around and done nothing to protect it. That's shameful. It disgusts me because I want to believe in the good faith of every member to look out for the people that they are privileged to serve. Donald Trump's one big ugly bill, an all-out assault on health care, an all-out assault on Medicaid, the largest cut to Medicaid in American history. This legislation will end Medicaid as we know it. Millions of people will lose their health care. Hospitals will close, including in rural America. People will lose their nursing homes. 1 in 4 nursing homes may close as a result of this dangerous and extreme Republican budget. Community-based health clinics relied upon by many of the people all across this country will shutter as a result of Donald Trump's one big ugly bill. People in this country will die unnecessary deaths. That's unacceptable. That's unconscionable. That's un-American. And that is why, as House Democrats, we stand on this floor aggressively pushing back on the everyday Americans on their behalf, pushing back on their behalf, because they will be so absolutely devastated if this bill were to pass in the House of Representatives. Donald Trump's one big ugly bill hurts everyday Americans and rewards billionaires with massive tax breaks. Why is it that every time, Mr. Speaker, Republicans have the opportunity to govern in a partisan way, you immediately race, Republicans immediately race to legislation that provides massive tax breaks for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected in this country. We've seen this happen all over time. During the presidency of Ronald Reagan, massive tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected, adding to our nation's debt and deficit. During the presidency of George W. Bush in 2001 and 2003, yet again, massive tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. In fact, the Republican president at that time, in 2001, inherited a budget surplus from President Bill Clinton and immediately turned around and took that budget surplus and turned it into a deficit, exploded the debt. Don't ever lecture us about fiscal responsibility. Not now, not ever. Mr. Speaker, Republicans are not the party of fiscal responsibility. You are the party of fiscal irresponsibility. Over and over and over again. And now with this bill, you've taken it to a whole nother level. Because in addition to exploding the debt by more than $3 trillion, and by some estimates, even more than that, saddling our children and our grandchildren with trillions of dollars in additional debt. Why? It appears to subsidize the lifestyles of the rich and shameless. That's extraordinary to me. But shouldn't be surprising, because it's exactly what we saw during the first 4 years of the Trump administration, where the signature legislative accomplishment was the 2017 G.O.P. tax scam, where by some estimates, 83% of the benefits would go to the wealthiest 1% in this country, saddling at the time our children and grandchildren with more than $2 trillion.
கிரகணம் முடிகிற வரைக்கும் அவளால அந்த அறையிலிருந்து வெளியில வர முடியாது.
To provide massive tax breaks to billionaires in this country, and then pay for some of it by going after working class Americans, everyday Americans, hardworking American taxpayers, middle class Americans, children and veterans and seniors and people with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, Trump's one big ugly bill is obscene in that regard. Seems to me that all of us have a responsibility as leaders to try to make life better for the American people. That's what leaders have done, particularly those who have served in the White House, when it comes to actually lifting up the people who we are entrusted to represent. That's what great leaders do. Leaders like FDR, President Johnson, President Obama, and so many others. That's what the track record says. American people in this country, they deserve real leadership. What we've seen from complete Republican rule in Washington, D.C., Mr. Speaker, it's not leadership that lifts up the American people. It's leadership that is tearing them down and tearing us apart. The first 6 months of this administration have been characterized by chaos, cruelty, and corruption. That's not real leadership. We know what real leadership looks like in the United States of America. Real leadership shows courage. Real leadership shows compassion. Real leadership shows commitment. Working with Congress as a separate and co-equal branch of government not to bend the knee to some extreme agenda, which is what, Mr. Speaker, my House Republican colleagues are doing by supporting this one big ugly bill. Real leadership requires working with Congress as a separate and co-equal branch of government to actually lift people up. President Lincoln, when he addressed the House of Representatives, I believe it was his second annual message to Congress, on December 1st in 1862, in the middle of the Civil War, an existential crisis that we were facing in the United States of America. He showed real leadership when he summoned this Congress to rise to the occasion. In that second annual message to Congress, December 1st, 1862, President Lincoln said, "Fellow citizens, we cannot escape history. We of this Congress and this administration will be remembered in spite of ourselves. No personal significance or insignificance can spare one or another of us. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation. We say we are for the Union. The world will not forget that we say this. We know how to save the Union. The world knows we do know how to save it. Even we here, hold the power and bear the responsibility. In giving freedom to the slave, we assure freedom to the free. Honorable alike in what we give and what we preserve. We shall nobly save or meanly lose the last best hope of earth. That's America. Even to this day, the last best hope on earth. Extraordinary that Abraham Lincoln, in America's infancy, understood the importance of this country, not just for its citizens, but for the world. He urged this Congress, we shall nobly save or meanly lose the last best hope of earth. Other means may succeed, this could not fail. The way is plain, peaceful, generous, just. A way which, if followed, the world will forever applaud. And God must forever bless. That's presidential leadership. That kind of leadership is missing in the United States of America right now. Exhibit A is the fact that at President Trump's urging, Mr. Speaker, our House Republican colleagues are here ready to rubber stamp, recklessly rubber stamp legislation that will rip health care away from more than 17 million Americans. That's not leadership. That's not the leadership that this country deserves. But that's what the American people are experiencing because of Republican rule here in Washington, D.C. Yet we know, Mr. Speaker, that things can be different. At the very beginning of the preamble of the United States Constitution, those words are written, "We, the people," in order to form a more perfect union. I like that. We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union. That's a recognition of the aspirational objective that all of us should have as part of our sacred charge to make life better for the American people, while also acknowledging that at its birth and even to this day, America is not a perfect country. But the gift that we've been given is that sacred charge to strive for a more perfect union, to look out for every single American as best we can. Now, we've seen that kind of leadership across the years, across the decades, across the centuries, particularly as it relates to the social safety net. It's a social safety net that's under extreme assault right now. Donald Trump's one big, ugly bill represents an unprecedented assault on America's social safety net, an unprecedented assault on hardworking American taxpayers. It's the exact opposite of the type of leadership that we've seen in this country that is designed to march us toward a more perfect union. It's one of the reasons why we can't forget American history. We need to learn from and lift up American history. All types of history, and I'll address that issue later, but let me also parenthetically pause and make it clear, Black history is American history. We will never let anyone erase it. We need to learn from it, not erase it. And we will never let that happen. Our history teaches us that what leadership actually does is set us on a course toward a more perfect union. And leaders have recognized that part of doing that is to make sure we are there for everyday Americans who would otherwise find themselves in an incredibly vulnerable situation. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, reflecting upon Social Security, which he championed, uttered these words: long before the economic blight of the Depression descended on the nation, millions of our people were living in wastelands of want and fear. Men and women too old and infirm to work either depended on those who had but little to share, or spent their remaining years within the walls of a poorhouse. Fatherless children early learned the meaning of being a burden to relatives or to the community. Men and women still strong, still young, but discarded as gainful workers, were drained of self-confidence and self-respect. The millions of today want and have a right to the same security their forefathers sought. The assurance that with the health and the willingness to work, they will find a place for themselves in the social and economic system of the time. Because it has become increasingly difficult for individuals to build their own security single-handed, government must now step in and help them lay the foundation stones. Just as government in the past has helped lay the foundation of business and industry. We must face the fact that in this country we have a rich man's security and a poor man's security, and that the government owes equal obligations to both. National security is not a half and half manner, it's all or none. President Roosevelt further went on to say that the Social Security Act offers to all our citizens a workable and working method of meeting urgent present needs and of forestalling future need. It utilizes the familiar machinery of our federal state government to promote the common welfare and the economic stability of the nation. The Act does not offer anyone, either individually or collectively, an easy life, nor was it ever intended so to do. None of the sums of money paid out to individuals in assistance or in insurance will spell anything approaching abundance. But they will furnish that minimum necessity to keep a foothold. And that is the kind of protection Americans want. Truer words could never have been spoken. That is the type of protection that we should be building upon here in the United States Congress, not undermining. President Franklin D. Roosevelt went on to say, what we are doing is good, but it is not good enough. To be truly national, a Social Security program must include all those who need its protection. Today, many of our citizens are still excluded from old age insurance and unemployment compensation because of the nature of their employment. This must be set aright, and it will be. FDR continues to say to the American people, I am hopeful that on the basis of studies and investigations now underway, the Congress will improve and extend the law. I'm also confident that each year will bring further development in federal and state Social Security legislation. And that is as it should be. One word of warning, however, in our efforts to provide security for all of the American people, let us not allow ourselves to be misled by those who advocate shortcuts to utopia of fantastic financial schemes. We have come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. There is still today a frontier that remains unconquered. In America, unclaimed. This is the nationwide frontier of insecurity, of human want and fear. This is the frontier, the America we have set ourselves to reclaim. President Franklin D. Roosevelt pioneered Social Security, but recognized that the work was unfinished, even as it related to making sure every single American, regardless of race or position in life, would have Social Security to be able to live out their golden years with grace and dignity. President Franklin D. Roosevelt talked about this frontier that America must continue to pursue, conquering the frontier of insecurity, of human want and fear. That's leadership. That's what we should be doing here in the United States of America, Mr. Speaker, not enacting devastating cuts to health care that will hurt millions of everyday Americans. All of this is also unfolding in an environment where Social Security is now under attack. That's extraordinary to me. Social Security is a sacred promise, a sacred trust between the American people and its stewards, her stewards in government. So I'm so thankful for leadership as it relates to Social Security, from people like Congressman John Larson, who recognizes that our goals recognizes that leadership is not attacking Social Security. We as House Democrats, led by John Larson, are determined to protect and strengthen Social Security for the American people. Keeping FDR's promise of conquering that frontier of financial insecurity. That's what we should be doing here in the United States Congress, not attacking the social safety net, Mr. Speaker. Many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they constantly call things like Social Security and Medicare entitlement programs. I think they label Social Security and Medicare entitlement programs, and by the way, as a result of this one big ugly bill, Medicare will be cut potentially by more than $500 billion. The largest cut to Medicare in American history, set in motion by Donald Trump's one big ugly bill, and now co-signed, it appears, by House Republicans. Mr. Speaker, House Republicans who've also co-signed this extraordinary assault on Social Security, closing offices.
Isn't it intriguing to see how OTT platforms stream content curated for different user personas? Not only do they recommend
seniors to access their hard-earned benefits. Social Security is not an entitlement program. Medicare is not an entitlement program, Mr. Speaker. I learned this very early on in life. When I was 15 years old, I secured my first job. I was a messenger traveling from office to office in Midtown Manhattan, delivering mail, delivering packages. I was just a sophomore at Midwood High School in Brooklyn, my first job, earning minimum wage, $3.35 an hour. Thankful for that money, having been raised by my mom and dad in a working class neighborhood in central Brooklyn, $3.35 an hour, coming of age in the middle of the crack cocaine epidemic in central Brooklyn. And I couldn't wait to get my first check. And I was told that because I was working part-time and I was a high school student, that the money that I made would not be taxed. And so as I was anticipating that first check, I multiplied the amount that I was making, $3.35 per hour, by the number of hours that I expected to work during that pay period. I calculated the total, and Mr. Speaker, that money was already spent. I couldn't wait to go to Albee Square Mall in Brooklyn and get some new sneakers so I could look fresh like Run DMC. Money was already spent, Mr. Speaker, because I was told that as a high school student working part-time, my first job, the money that I would make would not be taxed. And then I got my first check. And I had two questions, Mr. Speaker. Who is FICA? And why is he taking my money? You see, Mr. Speaker, what I learned is that every single American, from your first job to every single job that you hold until your last job, pays into Social Security and Medicare through FICA. Social Security and Medicare aren't entitlement programs, they are earned benefits. Earned benefits that people work hard for, earn throughout their entire life, and that they deserve. So keep your hands off Social Security and Medicare, the earned benefits of the American people. Hands off these earned benefits. Extraordinary that as a result of this one big ugly bill, Medicare could be cut by more than $500 billion, and these earned benefits of the American people could be jeopardized. Others have noted that because of Donald Trump's one big ugly bill, the insolvency of Social Security and Medicare could be accelerated. This is the exact opposite of that sacred charge that President Franklin D. Roosevelt articulated to the nation as he reflected upon the important first step that was taken with the establishment of Social Security. He's not the only one. This is a great country, an exceptional country. So many examples of what leadership actually looks like. Leadership that we are not seeing right now from the majority in the House of Representatives. Leadership that we did not see on the Republican side of the aisle in the United States Senate in passing this disgusting abomination, and certainly we're not seeing this level of leadership coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But that we can reflect upon and be inspired by as we navigate our way through these challenging times. President Truman President, the great FDR. November 19th, 1945, he delivered a special message to Congress recommending a comprehensive health program. I want to read just a few of those words because it shows us what leadership actually looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like to have presidential leadership that we in Congress should aspire to working with, as opposed to bending the knee to an extreme agenda reflected in this one big ugly bill. President Truman said to this Congress, in a statement recommending a comprehensive health program, millions of our citizens do not now have a full measure of opportunity to achieve and enjoy good health. Millions do not now have protection or security against the economic effects of sickness. The time has arrived for action to help them obtain that opportunity and that protection. Truman goes on to say, President Truman goes on to say, our new Economic Bill of Rights should mean health security for all, regardless of residence, station, or race, everywhere in the United States of America. He says, regardless of residence, station, or race. That's presidential leadership that brings people together, doesn't seek to divide us, which is what unfortunately is happening in the United States of America right now. President Truman goes on to say to Congress, we should resolve now that the health of this nation is a national concern, that financial barriers in the way of attaining health shall be removed, that the health of all its citizens deserves the help of all the nation. Truman goes on to articulate the challenges that exist in America as it relates to illnesses. He articulates several of them. Talks about the deficiencies in health care that existed across America. And the fact that in the aftermath of World War II, it was clear that so many people without coverage were medically infirm. And he made clear that's unacceptable.
Stop wasting time applying for jobs on LinkedIn or Naukri or other online job portals. You know why?
Healthcare. Aspirational vision. A vision designed to lift the American people up, not rip healthcare away from them, which is what this one big, ugly bill will do, ripping healthcare away from more than 17 million Americans. That's shameful. It disgusts me that we're on the floor of the House of Representatives right now having to push back so aggressively against an all-out assault on the health care of the American people when we should be trying to lift them up in a manner consistent, Mr. Speaker, with what President Truman once charged this Congress with doing. And of course, he wasn't the only one. We're thankful for other leaders who worked with this Congress in prior years to actually advance the health, safety, and well-being of the American people. President Lyndon Baines Johnson, in connection with the Great Society, inspired in part by his own experiences growing up in the hill country of Texas, seeing rural poverty and the devastating impacts of it. Something that he was inspired to address, as opposed to this one big, ugly Republican bill that will result in rural hospitals closing in the United States of America. That's not the type of leadership that this country needs, that rural America needs. Thankful that we have examples of the type of leadership that hopefully, Mr. Speaker, we can aspire to achieving in this country. President Lyndon Baines Johnson, in connection with the signing of Medicare and Medicaid. He spoke to the American people. He said, because the need for this action is plain, and it is so clear indeed that we marvel not simply at the passage of this bill, but what we marvel at is that it took so many years to pass it. And I am so glad that Amy Forand is here to see it finally passed and signed, one of the first authors. There are more than 18 million Americans over the age of 65. Most of them have low incomes. Most of them are threatened by illness and medical expenses that they cannot afford. And through this new law, Mr. President, every citizen will be able, in his productive years, when he is earning, to insure himself against the ravages of illness in his old age. President Johnson was referring to President Harry Truman, who was there at the signing ceremony, having recognized President Truman's vision. He says, and through this new law, Mr. President, every citizen will be able, in his productive years, when he is earning, to insure himself against the ravages of illness in his old age. That was the beauty of Medicare. You pay into it, it's an earned benefit. And you can reap the benefits in your golden years. President Johnson went on to say, this insurance will help pay for care in hospitals, in skilled nursing homes, or in the home. It's ironic. That's what presidential leadership looks like. LBJ says this insurance will help pay for care in hospitals, in skilled nursing homes, or in the home. And yet, Mr. Speaker, we're here 60 years later, and Republicans are trying to jam a budget down the throats of the American people that will close hospitals, close nursing homes, and detonate the ability of millions of people to access home care. That's shameful. It's not the type of leadership that this country needs right now, but that's what we're getting. Chaos, cruelty, and corruption. President Johnson went on to talk about Medicaid, which is the subject of an all-out assault now by this reckless Republican budget, the G.O.P. tax scam, this one big ugly bill. So I want to make sure that the record reflects what enlightened leadership had to say about Medicaid. The benefits under the law are as varied and broad as the marvelous modern medicine itself. If it has a few defects, such as the method of payment of certain specialists, then I'm confident those can be quickly remedied, and I hope they will be. No longer will older Americans be denied the healing miracle of modern medicine. No longer will illness crush and destroy the savings that they have so carefully put away over a lifetime so that they may enjoy dignity in their later years. No longer will young families see their own incomes and their own hopes eaten away. No longer will this nation refuse the hand of justice to those who have given a lifetime of service and wisdom and labor to the progress of this progressive country. Medicare and Medicaid benefit older Americans right now. People who have given a lifetime of service and wisdom and labor to the progress of this progressive country, as LBJ spoke to. And this bill, Mr. President, again, a nod to President Harry Truman, is even broader than that. It will increase Social Security benefits for all of our older Americans. It will improve a wide range of health and medical services for Americans of all ages. And then President Lyndon Baines Johnson leans in on the importance of Medicaid with a greater degree of precision. He says, but there is another tradition that we share today. Calls upon us never to be indifferent toward despair, commands us never to turn away from helplessness. It directs us never to ignore or to spurn those who suffer untended in a land that is bursting with abundance. And this is not just our tradition, or even the tradition of the nation. It is as old as the day it was first commanded. Thou shalt open thine hand wide unto thy brother, to thy poor, to thy needy in thy land. Is that what we're doing here today in the United States Congress? Opening our hands of grace and compassion and responsibility to our fellow Americans, our fellow citizens? No, that's not what Donald Trump's one big ugly bill is all about. It's an assault on everyday Americans to reward billionaires with massive tax breaks. That's extraordinary. President Clinton, in the 1990s, talked about the Children's Health Insurance Program. Program designed to make sure that children in this country would have access